In the previous lesson, we saw that the early manuscripts of the Bible are authentic by the volume of evidence in both writing and archaeology. The Bible is at least as reliable and authentic as anything else, and the Christian faith from which it comes is the most objective and evidence-based among all religions. Without a verified fact of history, Jesus' resurrection from the dead, Christianity and the Bible are just another belief system. So what I have here on the screen is some dominoes ready to go, and dominoes will continue on once they're started, but something outside themselves has to start them, and that's what origination is all about. It's that the realm we live in is observed to be something that was started by something else. This is the laws of cause and effect and all that, but the point being that we need to look at where things originate. Now, we've seen this page before that I've had up of my link to my website where I have a whole section on the Bible. Let me see if I can scroll up there and show you the title again. This is a To the Point series on feather.net. And in the features, so we're down here on the inerrancy and origination, the roots of the Bible. So we're going to look at one in particular, this particular link on inerrancy, and we have three parts, and you can see there a quote that I begin with, but keep in mind that the Bible, compared to other ancient texts, has been by far the most attacked, scrutinized, debated, almost to the level of obsession. As the quote shows here, what other book is the focus of so much debate and so much intense hatred? This alone should at least tell us that there's something special about the Bible. No other book is subjected to this. So just something to keep in mind in all our talking about the reliability of the Bible and why it is that the Bible, above all other ancient texts, not just religious texts, is the most attacked. So now let's focus on originality and the study of the resources shown on this other webpage that I had here first is the claim that there's a claim that the Bible borrowed from other earlier texts, and it's a weak claim. The pagan roots of Christianity, you can see there, these are links for further study on your part to go and check out if you're interested in the arguments pro and con on that issue. But when it comes to origination, it's not as cut and dry, not as objective as the historical accuracy of the Bible, but it's pretty strong nonetheless for the Bible being original and not having plagiarized. Okay, and let's look at some quotes from Christian Think Tank, and also is the primary reference here. It's an excellent website. You can get the link there. And the point is that somebody thought of something first. You can't just go by the date of a writing to say when an idea originated. The date of the writing is not necessarily the date that people first thought of something. It's just the first people to write it down. And in these ancient times, it becomes less and less common for people to write things at all. So we can easily claim just as well that the Bible simply restores truth that had been distorted by oral tradition or earlier writings. So that's why it was written later, because it's fixing something that went bad. Similarities are to be expected, but the differences are the key. As I showed here on the document, in the red writing, that's a link that you can click on and pursue. We share 50% of our DNA with bananas. So it's not the similarities that matter, it's the differences, and that's the point. So the Bible is at least as reliable as any other writings in this regard. We don't know who came up with an idea first, and we don't know by the date of writing. We can say which was written first, but not which was invented or observed to be true first. So since the intent of the series is not to spoon feed, but just to guide and to prompt you to do your own research, I would encourage you to pursue these links and also the others on the other page here. I have a whole bunch of links here. But keep in mind that if alleged borrowing or plagiarism makes the Bible unreliable or non-authoritative, then why stop at the Bible? We have as much right to accuse even the earliest writings of borrowing, since earlier writings than those could have been lost. So in other words, if the Bible is to be rejected because you can find earlier writings, then where did those earlier writings get their ideas? We don't know, but we can't say that they weren't borrowed. That's the point. And you can see here on the rest of this article, quoting mainly Christian think tank, this is kind of a summary of it. There's a lot of material there. But they go into mostly how the Old Testament was written, which is more a matter of borrowing when it comes to actual evidence, as far as what people claim is true about the Bible or not true. So you can rest assured, at least I reached this conclusion from looking at the evidence, that the Bible is no worse. At the very least, we can say the Bible is no worse than any other religious idea, philosophical idea, or writing. So now let's move on. I think I want to go to this one, part 2, because that was part 1 I think I had up before. And we're going to look at the idea of bias. Okay, origination is something nobody can prove one way or the other. We can only say that the Bible has at least as much right to sit at the table with other ancient writings and other religions when it comes to original ideas. So, moving on to bias, just like as with originality, this too is not an indictment on only the Bible. It can be applied to just about everything. But the Bible's content shows at least some level of objectivity. And while I have this up here, we're going to look at the issue of credibility of witnesses. But let's look at the content itself. For example, the times in which the Bible was written were highly patriarchal. Yet in many cases, women are portrayed as brave, strong, intelligent, independent, wise, moral, and even blessed by God to judge a nation or lead an army. These are all found in the Old Testament. And women were, of course, the first to whom Jesus appeared after his execution and resurrection. And only one male disciple stuck around even for the execution, for his crucifixion. That was John. Another example is the Bible's portrayal of Israel as unfaithful, wicked, ungrateful, weak, and sometimes cowardly. Yet another example is that the disciples who allegedly stole Jesus' body, as some critics say, were sometimes portrayed as faithless, weak, slow-witted, and cowardly. Would the Israelites make up stories like that? The content of the Bible indicates a reverence for truth above all else. That's what we can say from all those examples. Because who, if they were making up a story or borrowing one from earlier, even more patriarchal times, would invent such things and would portray themselves in such poor light? So the content of the Bible is the best argument against tampering and against bias. And the same goes for miracles. Miracles in the Bible don't make it unreliable or biased. Isn't it biased to presume that the miracles are all imaginary and impossible before you even look at the evidence? Their bias can go in both directions. The evidence for a past event rests upon the credibility of the witnesses, because obviously it can't be repeated as a past event. We can't examine it in the present. We can only cross-examine witnesses, and those witnesses must be quality witnesses. It's just as with a criminal trial. Such a cross-examination of witnesses has been done against the gospel writers by many over the years, including a founder of the Harvard School of Law by the name of Simon Greenleaf. His writing his document Testimony of the Evangelist, you can look that up, amounts to a legal verdict on the matter, and he found the four gospel writers to be highly credible. And as with others who had set out to prove the resurrection a hoax, Greenleaf was an atheist prior to his investigation and a Christian afterwards. That's how strong the evidence is by, at best, an unbiased researcher, and in reality a hostile one who expected to find Jesus guilty of not rising from the dead. Instead, he found the evidence convincing because the witnesses were cross-examined and found to be credible. And so their account is trustworthy, and by all accounts, and the fact that there are, and he goes into much detail in his writing, Testimony of the Evangelist, about hostile witnesses and how important that testimony is, and it convinced one of the founders of the Harvard School of Law to become a Christian. So, again, can you think of another ancient text, religious or otherwise, that has been subjected to that level of inquisition by so many people for such a long time, much less that it continues to overcome all challenges? I don't think anyone can name another document that's subjected to that and continues to be and can claim to be less biased. Okay, so this is all in favor of the Bible as a document, as an account of history. So just as when it comes to document evidence itself and archaeological evidence, no other ancient writings can better demonstrate originality of ideas and less bias compared to the Bible. Plagiarism and bias abound even in our own day. So what can we say about the distant past? It's a miracle that truth and fact can be discovered at all, but we do so by consistently and objectively studying the evidence. And at the same time, had logic or reasoning been bad or faulty or biased for whatever reason, we often find people using very bad logic, that can make that all a waste of time. You can have the best evidence in the world and reach wrong conclusions by faulty reasoning. So the integrity of the investigator is just as important as that of the defendant or the person on trial. In this case, the Bible. So the people investigating the Bible also have to have high character and consistent objective standards. So as you can see on some of the words on the screen here that you can check yourself and more about Simon Greenleaf, this is a very, very big issue for the reliability of the Bible. So even then, charges of plagiarism and bias really aren't even the best arguments against the Bible anyway. They're just excuses more than anything else to avoid giving the Bible the respect it deserves as an ancient text. Critics love to take the easy way out by poisoning the well, which is a fallacy, meant to discourage people from even starting a serious consideration of the Bible. They want to dismiss it from the start, to declare a mistrial, basically, so that facts are not brought out. There are very few people like Simon Greenleaf who aren't afraid they might find the Bible to be genuine after all. So they try these fallacies, as I mentioned, like poisoning the well, and that's what charges of borrowing, plagiarism, bias are. They are first-level attempts at dismissal so that people won't investigate the actual evidence for or against the Bible. So perhaps the biggest deterrent to seriously considering evidence for the Bible is fear of hard work. Not just fear that it might be true, and the evidence might prove the Bible to be genuine and reliable, but that it's going to take a lot of work to do this investigation. It takes time and effort, and a lot of it, and most are unwilling to do that themselves, so they rely on others, and that's all well and good, but those others should be good researchers with a reputation as having high character. So if you're going to delegate your responsibility, make sure you delegate it to people who are competent and trustworthy. So if you're watching this series, you're already shown an interest in facts and evidence, but finish the race, either yourself or have someone else do it. But again, be careful who you choose. So as I have here on the screen, the next step is to examine the issue of inerrancy and inspiration. That's a bigger issue as far as, once we have this foundation laid of the Bible as a reliable historical text, then we have to decide on its content, since that is not in question anymore, as to whether it's from God. That's a completely different issue than historical or scientific technical evidence. We have to decide, once those are settled, whether this is from God or not, and whether we have it without error or not. And those issues, as we branch out from the solid foundation, get less and less provable. But again, this is the same case for every other writing that we might compare the Bible to. So no one can say that because we have less hard evidence as we go along, that this is somehow an indictment on the Bible. We know that's not true. The Bible is no less reliable than anything else. Everything suffers that same reducing, sliding scale of hard evidence as they branch out from the core of what it's based on. And the Bible has the best core of all because we have an objective, forensic basis for the Bible. So we need to, as Christians, move on from the distractions, the weak arguments against the Bible as equally, at least equally reliable to anything else we have not dismissed in history and we accept without question. Let's move on from that and allow ourselves as Christians to be tied up there and move on to issues that matter to us more as Christians. It's our right to decide how much, if any of the Bible, is not inspired of God and not inerrant. So we'll look at those issues in a future video and look at the issue of language, because then we start getting into context and so forth. So we'll see you for the next video. Thanks for listening.